congratulations, America. You've broken a new record. So, you know, the Republicans were like, we're #1. We knew it. We knew it. What's the record? Warmest year on record here in the United States, in the 48 contiguous U.S. states. In fact, here, let me show you a chart. You see the top 6 here of the highest years on record on average temperature. That's in Fahrenheit. And you see the other ones, and then you see 55.3 for 2012. Look, before, the previous 2 hottest years were separated by 0.01 degrees. But this year, we took over a 1 degree jump. That's a 100 times larger jump. Gee, I wonder if there's climate change going on. Look, 2012 felt like we hit the tipping point in so many different ways. Now, look, you can look at that list and say, hey, wait, some of the years are from 1921, etc. But the other thing you might have noticed is that 4 out of the 6 hottest years we have ever had in history are from 1998 on. Gee, I wonder if there's a trend here. And in fact, we broke so many different records. One of them was the warmest spring on record as well. And in that, do you know that over the 20th century average, how much higher were we this year than the 20th century average for springs? No, 1 degree was a huge difference, right, for overall? 5.2 degrees warmer than the 20th century average.
Jesus.
Okay, that's exactly right. Okay, it gets worse. We broke over 34,000 high temperature records, or tied them this year. 34,000. Now look, you break records all the time. For example, as you can see, we did over 6,600 daily record low temperatures as well. But the thing is, the ratio in a year, first of all, the numbers are not supposed to be this high. Number 2, the ratio is supposed to be about 1 to 1 in an average year. In fact, that's how they've been for a long time. Last year, the ratio was 5 to 1 in terms of hot records as opposed to cold records. We're getting warmer. We also had records in droughts. We had records in wildfires. And let me show you one last chart here. This is temperatures again. Look at this. This is from 1895 on, and it's in Fahrenheit. And as you can see, 2012 jumps way up. Okay, now look. If it goes back to being cooler, you can say, hey, it's a random fluctuation, and that happens. But as we've shown you over and over again, these are not random fluctuations. It keeps getting hotter and hotter. In 2012, it looks like we jumped a shark. And as I was reading this stuff, I was thinking, what's it going to be like next year? What's it going to be like in 10 years?
Well, it's going to continue to get worse. And as it continues to get worse, we're going to continue to have certain media outlets claim that climate change isn't happening, or if they concede that it is happening, they will argue that it is not man-made and there's nothing we can do about it, right? And it's all because we want to protect big businesses like oil and coal in the country. But there's another element of it that I think that we don't emphasize enough, and it's the fact that everyday average Americans do not want to change their lifestyle. Okay, to actually make an impact on climate change in this country, we would have to, scale back significantly. And many people are not willing to do that. And also other countries have to scale back. And it's really difficult as, a world leader to go to other countries and say, yeah, you're being a little gluttonous. You're being a little excessive. You need to scale it back a little bit. When we're the leaders in over excessiveness.
I know, you should change your light bulbs, etc. But really, the big change is going to come from government rules. That's just the reality, okay? And we've got huge companies who make a profit off of the old rules, so they're not going to want to change. But you mentioned the media, and the media is enormously telling. In fact, I want to go to the next set of graphics on this, because when you look at the media, as Media Matters has done, and how much they covered things, they looked at it in terms of the Sunday talk shows, which set a lot of the agenda for the country, and the nightly news. And you can see in both of those charts, in 2009, there was decent coverage of global warming. It drops off dramatically in 2010, in 2011, and 2012. Now, in nightly news, actually, because of all the disasters, it picked up a little bit. So nightly news did significantly better than the Sunday talk shows. Let me give you facts about the Sunday talk shows that are amazing. Sunday talk shows spent less than 8 minutes on climate change the whole year. 8 minutes. ABC's This Week was the best. They did over 5 minutes themselves. Wow. NBC's Meet the Press covered it the least. They just had 1 6-second mention.
What?
I don't even know how you do a 6-second mention.
That's what I was wondering. I mean, they probably were like reading someone's quote and it mentioned climate change. It had nothing to do with the story at hand.
Funny you mentioned that because I'm going to get the quote second. But I get literally like 6 seconds like, oh, and by the way, global warming is happening. Anyway, back to tax cuts, right? So now when it comes to the nightly news coverage, again, a little bit better. We had nightly news shows devoted just under an hour to climate change, which is still not a lot, but it's up from 38 minutes in 2011, partly because of the disasters. And NBC nightly news coverage, by the way, was again the worst. And they covered it only 17 minutes, okay? Interesting that NBC is the worst in both categories. So who did the Sunday talk shows quote or talk to about climate change? This is the one I love. 54% of the time it was media figures, you know, pundits, etc., writers. 31% of the time it was Republicans, 15% of the time it was other. The two facts that I love here, they never, not once, quoted a scientist. Not once. And if you're noticing and you're looking at that chart carefully, you're like, wait, the politicians, it says 31% politicians, but it says in the corner there, Republicans 100%. What does that mean? Every time they talked about global warming, they talked to a Republican. Every single time in the year 2012, when the Sunday talk shows covered global warming, they talked to a Republican. They never talked to a Democrat, and they never quoted a scientist.
Well, I'm sure they challenged the Republicans, right?
Oh, of course, right. By the way, only 11% of the coverage implied that scientists have an agreement on global warming, that they largely agree. Only 11% of the time. That's the reality. 99.8% of the scientists agree on global warming. It was only mentioned 11%. And here comes another one of my favorites. 44% failed to correct a guess who questioned the science. So if you think about that, they only talked to 100% of the time about two Republicans about global warming. And by a 4-to-1 margin, they never questioned them. So what does the average American hear if they're trying to get information about politics in these talk shows? By a 4-to-1 margin, they get people questioning climate change with no response whatsoever. Mm-hmm. And they don't hear from a single scientist. That's amazing. And that's exactly how the American people get duped. So if you're not from this country and you're wondering, how come they don't do anything about climate change? How come they don't understand the urgency? That's because our TV stations decided not to tell them. So they have no sense of how bad the urgency is. They never even heard from a scientist. All of 2012, in the midst of record-breaking temperatures and droughts and fires, etc., the hottest month ever was July of 2012 in history for the United States. Not a peep from our political pundits. Gee, I wonder if they're working with the establishment to make sure that there is no change. I can't quite tell.